Hello, guys, and welcome back to Time Under Tension. We are coming at you from Arizona now. We've had a long week. It's crazy to think a week ago today, we actually left our 2-year home in North Carolina for this long road trip to Arizona. And now it's a new week, and it's like we just kicked it right off back into our usual lives, but in a whole new environment. And after, I would say, a pretty revolutionary week overall. So today, building off of our most recently introduced topic of transitions, transitional phases in life, going to talk about this experience as kind of an illustration of what a process of transition can look like, the challenges that can come up, and how to move forward with courage and solidarity and just this sense of excitement instead of fear and anxiety at the unknown that a transition can bring with it.
Yeah, I think it'll be cool to talk about the actual transition from North Carolina to Phoenix. It Before we left, my thoughts were much more focused on life here. Like the transition was life in North Carolina to life in Phoenix and not necessarily the actual transition of the move in the present moment. So just discussing that a little bit further, I think will be really cool to talk about just because I'm not really sure that this part is talked about very often in transitions. It's usually about once you're here and you're grounded and you're set, then you can talk about the transition and not really exploring the actual day-to-day struggles that come with the moving process.
That's a great point. And I think that, and I'd love to hear your strategy or tactic on this as well. But for me, one thing that's been helpful with this move is a couple of months ago when we talked about, hey, if we're going to do this, if we're going to move across the country, let's start building excitement around the transition ahead of time so that there's a lot of positive emotions embedded in it. And for me, that looked like kind of visualizing what life here would look like. So imagining, oh, the weather's going to be so nice. And in the spring, we can go out for hikes, and there's going to be a ton of stuff to do outdoors, and we're going to live near restaurants. And it was all about envisioning the end product here, but not getting too caught up on what that actual transition would look like, because that is something that inspired a lot of anxiety for me.
Mhm. What was some of the anxiousness you were feeling? You want to tell everybody?
I think the unknown, I feel like I have kind of a negative cognitive bias where I will find the potential downsides, the potential challenges and obstacles in like every situation. It I remember saying as a kid, a young adult, it's better to expect the worst so that you're prepared. And then if things go well, you're at least pleasantly surprised. But I would always kind of expect the worst of situations because then I felt like I was protecting myself if things didn't go according to plan. I had already kind of expected they would just suck. So,
Mhm.
unfortunately, I feel like there's an aspect of manifestation in that where I won't always pour myself fully into something because I will be set on failure from the start. I'll find ways to procrastinate on things, or I will constantly look for the challenge in the situation as an obstacle indicating that I'm not on the right track or that I shouldn't be doing this or things are always hard for me instead of seeing it like, here's the next challenge I need to overcome so I can grow, which is something I'm working on now. So with this move, I found myself kind of falling into that one negative stepping stone after another. So, oh my gosh, we gotta sell all the furniture. And that's could be a great thing because it's a way to help other people and make a little money and really like clear out for the move. But it was like, oh my gosh, I got to get all this listed. That sounds stressful. What if people are like freaky and come over to our apartment or alone? Like just everything that could possibly go wrong with that. And then like as soon as we started like selling stuff pretty quickly, I didn't like sit and revel in that. It was more like, oh, well, oh my gosh, now we got to think about returning the router and scheduling the walkthrough and oh my God, then we have to drive and like what if we can't sell all the furniture and we have to just like put it on the curb and oh my gosh, it was like one thing after another. So I found that when I spent too much time focusing on aspects of the move that I couldn't predict, that I couldn't really control ahead of time, I experienced a lot more anxiety than if I just focused on, hey, this is going to be an exciting thing, kind of vaguely. This is going to be an exciting transition. I can't really predict what's going to happen. Let me just focus on, oh my gosh, we're moving to this amazing place. It's going to be like a great new, exciting experience. And that seemed to help me stay a little bit more grounded than getting caught up in the process leading into that new chapter.
Mm, that's really good. Were there some instances where you caught yourself in the middle of one of those thoughts and was able to shift your mindset into something that was exciting for you here? And can you talk about maybe a situation where something exciting about this place that's totally out of your comfort zone? You're so used to finding challenges and obstacles and problems, but allowing yourself a little bit of openness of your heart to get excited about something here. Was there a specific instance where that happened?
Where I felt like
Where you
negatively and had to shift it.
where you actively changed your mind?
Yeah, I think that something I've really held on to in studying anxiety and learning how to experience it and give myself grace when I have it is remembering that the pathways that trigger anxiety and upon which I experience anxiety are the same as those for excitement. So, something that I feel kind of anxious about would be, okay, I gotta move and I'm gonna be going to a new gym. And that's kind of like stressful because I'm not sure everything. When are the busy times and what equipment do they have? And like, is it gonna be like, are a lot of people in the way all the time? Or a lot of people like videoing and it's hard to get in a workout? Or am I gonna feel pressured to compete again or all these things. Instead, it was like, okay, I get to go to a new gym. This is going to be really cool. I can't wait to try out this new equipment. Like I'm going to meet new people. So
Mhm,
the same feelings and thoughts have a dark side. So it's like, what aspect of it do I want to focus on? The fact that it's the unknown and that can be scary, or the fact that it's the undiscovered and that can be exciting?
mhm, mhm. So good. I think when I think about my transition was more, I'm leaving something really good, and that's really sad, and it's really challenging. And I was reading in my Coming Alive book, it's like the second book of the Tools book by Phil Stutz and Barry. Um, that book has really helped me to cope with all of this because it has shifted entirely my mindset around pain and how pain is the true portal for rebirth, newness, growth. It's the death of something. Yes, when you're in pain and you completely open up your heart to experience the pain, if you just try to keep it in your head, you can't actually process through the pain. You're stuck in this processing of the pain and why did this happen and how come this happened to me and why is the universe always putting things in my way and like why am I having to experience um this deep pain instead of when you open up your heart, it takes in the pain without judgment and it brings it into your body so you can fully process through all of the pain you're experiencing. And for me, this transition was a rebirth opportunity where I was able to take in all the pain of having to leave Davidson and that, you know, I'm gonna cry. My, like, that was my family, you know? That was I really loved them, and when I'm a little bit different, like, my perception is always like, "This is gonna be so fun and great and adventure and creating and la la la," and I'm, like, all over the place, like, positive, almost to the opposite side where I you balance me out really well because 'cause you're like, "Well, what about if this happens?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I should probably think about that." You know, I'm a little bit more, like, spontaneous and seeing a lot of the bright colors around in the space, so I was able to really create a healthy balance, but I found myself having some internal tension with letting go of the life I was, you know, living in Davidson. And so when I was able to open up my heart and really process through all of that pain, it actually helped me to transform that pain into purpose, which helps with, you know, what I do with life coaching and mental performance training. And the tool, really me processing all of that pain and understanding the deep, you know, hard truth that this life was gonna die, and that's okay because out of every death comes rebirth of some kind, and so the rebirth idea that he talks about using this tool, I was actually able to really understand that this was gonna be a season where I was gonna need to be like a lobster and kinda, like, go down to the bottom and grow by myself, like, not only did we drive 30 plus hours by ourselves, but the time in which we spent together was so minimal. I wasn't having a lot of, um I on purpose actually, wasn't having a lot of external input. I was very much in a place of enjoying the silence and the stillness, and that particular period of time in the transition really helped me to realize this is like my growth. This is my rebirth. This is my time where I'm coming into myself, about to explore this completely new journey that's ahead of us here in Arizona.
So I want to jump back to that idea of needing to let go. I think that that's one of the hardest parts of moving into a transitional phase is that there's something about what we've done in the past that we've begun to apply to our identity, perhaps. We begin to associate it with being safe. And we kind of talked about how our nervous system like wants to keep us safe. And a lot of times it will equate the familiar with that which is safe because if we've like survived in this situation in the past, then we must be safe in it. But our soul craves growth and we need that to continue like thriving. But moving into this transitional phase, you felt that pain, it sounds like, of having to let go of something that was really good. It had a lot of good
Mhm.
in it. It wasn't like you were leaving something that it just was like 100% clear in your mind that it was just bad or negative or not for you. There was so much
Mhm.
good in it. So I'm wondering, how do you differentiate feelings of resistance inside that are the challenge of leaving something that you love and that has served you, like your
Mhm.
family? How do you
Mhm.
differentiate that, like, potentially, like, negative feeling from more of, like, a dissonance, like, "Hey, I should not be making this decision?"
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the biggest things to point out is when we are stuck in anxiety or worry, we're actually in fight or flight and we're not able to have rational thought. So, the way in which to access rational thinking is to get yourself regulated again. And because of all the tools that I've learned and spent the time really developing my own set of tools that really get me regulated quickly, that in itself, the background work, I think, is why I was able to process this. But the main key aspect of what you're talking about in my point of view, is that deep connection to your intuition. Because if I wasn't aligned and connected to my intuition through a lot of the meditation that I do or the mindfulness practices, getting truly self aware in stillness, in silence, understanding the healthy relationship between being and doing, my being is that connection to my intuition. It's that regulated state. It's where I can truly hear, it's where I can actually listen. And putting those two things together, I knew internally, I knew internally, and you just know. It's hard to describe with language because the two centers of your brain aren't actually connected. The emotion that you feel, I knew in my intuition because I was spending that intentional time getting grounded and getting regulated. I could hear very clearly my intuition was saying, it's time to go. It's time to take a leap of faith and start this business. So that happened before I actually even made the decision. You know, I knew internally it's time. And so the pain following, I was able to be very open, like I talked about, very open to that pain and knowing that that was going to bring deeper clarity of who I am and what I meant to do and growth and deeper lessons that of, that those past experiences you're talking about of safety. All of those decisions, our past is necessary to explore because all of the decisions we've made are leading us to today and the current challenges and things that we're doing today, which are then going to influence our future, what we choose to do today. And the past for me, I have definitely chosen to allow other people to make decisions for me. And I knew that that was something I was going to have to really challenge. That's that inner knowing, that deep connection to my intuition led me to then this place of like, safety is staying here. Safety is staying here. I'm doing really well. I'm this really successful, super comfortable, definitely feeling like thriving. But I know my soul is telling me, you got to go. You need to go. And that's where that fear of unknown and growth and all of this, the soul, the forward movement, the progression piece of me is like knows exactly what I need. And for me, understanding that my intuition is always going to be choosing what's best for me, what's great. This is good, but this is great. And this is where God's working for me. So I had, not only was I then in that period of time able to say, okay, I know I can connect to my intuition. All of these things that I did to keep myself safe in the earlier years of my life, I was an opportunity now for me to uproot all of those things. Trusting my intuition. Now I have to stop letting my parents make my decisions for me with my job. I have to stop not having faith in my own self. And I've never done this before. I don't know what a life coach that also does mental performance and has a spirituality aspect to it does. It's so new. There's like not very many people doing that. So it's that fear of, well, now we don't have benefits and like what does financial stability look like? And I could focus on that and almost manipulate myself back into staying where I'm safe. But that trust, that knowing of my intuition, getting myself to a regulated state with those tools helps me to have rational thinking, to stay in alignment with my best and truest self and take those courageous steps forward, like you were talking about in the beginning. That was a super long answer, but I think that answered your question.
Yeah, and I think there's an aspect of that phase where, and really in general, and it's something I've been practicing that's helped me with my anxiety a bit, is like there's always gonna be things outside of us that we don't have. Like, there's going to be people who have done something similar to what we're doing, and they had a resource of that we don't have right now. And there's gonna be money outside of our grasp, or there's going to be networks outside of our own network. Like, there's always gonna be something outside of us when we're constantly, like, looking around for, like, "Oh, well, if I had that, then maybe I could do this," or, "Well, I don't have that, so I'm not sure I have what it takes to make this transition." And what we really need to do is come from a belief that we always have exactly what we need. So we need to start looking at the resources that we have to handle the situation that we're in. So, like, moving into a transitional phase, no, I don't know how much the travel costs are gonna be. I don't know what it's gonna be like to drive 30 hours across the country. I'm not really sure, how we're gonna get into this apartment. Like, we were driving and we hit some bad weather and we had to get to the apartment before the office closed so we could get our key, and we were like 10 minutes away from the time that they closed, and I'm like, what I know is that I cannot not go to the bathroom for the next 7 hours or be, like, super stressed at every stop. So, like, what resources do we have? Okay, you're gonna call the apartment, we're gonna reach out to them, see can can they leave the key somewhere? We're gonna reach out to friends in the area. Can someone go get the key for us? And then worst case scenario, we get a hotel there. Like, we just looked at the resources that we had. Or we could have been like super stressed and focus on the fact that, oh my God, we're not gonna make it, and then be like driving like crazy trying to get there. And instead, like, it totally worked out. They just left the key in our apartment and it was great. And we had everything that we needed and we got here in time and we were able to take a route that avoided the bad weather, even though it took a little longer because we utilized the resources that we had to address the situation. And that honestly managed stress way more than sitting there worrying about how we were going to make it all work out. It was like, all right, let's move from worry into productive action. Like, you can feel worried for a second and be like, oh my gosh, this could happen. Okay, let's step back and let's be preventative and let's be resourceful.
Mhm. Was
I
there, I'm going to talk about my, the first night we got to Nashville and there was only a 6.5 hour drive or so. And the next day was about 10. And I was struggling because I was feeling exhausted and a little bit of my pot symptoms were starting to reemerge. And it caused me to worry and get into that anxious state of mind. And I wasn't getting myself regulated. And the resources that I had at the time were not meant for tomorrow, just like you're saying. It's like in this moment, I'm good. I'm about to go to sleep. And you were like, we can take this drive. We can stop in Little Rock. I'm talking, you're helping me work through it. And what I realized is in this moment, I have all of the resources that I need. And I went to bed, I woke up, we went to the gym, we trained at an awesome gym, got a great workout and had an amazing breakfast, hit the road, and those 10 hours went by like it was just a snap of a finger. It didn't even seem that long at all. And to your point is like, we, I struggle personally with being in the present moment with the resources that I have and applying them to the future as if only have the energy right now to drive maybe 30 minutes that night, and I'm thinking about driving 10 hours tomorrow. That's not where I am. I'm right here in the present moment, and I have to trust that I'm going to have everything that I need, to your point, the next day. And I totally did. So I think just to your point, like when we're stressed and anxious, get back to the present, return back to the now, especially in transition. You're going to have to do this probably way more often than the usual because a lot of random things will start to happen. It's super uncertain and unknown. So you helping me get back to the present moment helped me to realize, okay, I'm good here. I'm about to sleep. I have everything that I need right now for where I'm at right now. Wake up. How do I feel? Feel awesome. Have the resources to tackle this 10-hour drive.
Exactly. You and that I feel like can help you stay more present because you're not trying to like project yourself into the future with this like limited perspective of like, oh, well, I'll have this then. And I think
Right.
that can be applied on so many scales. Like, for me, like, financially, that's a big strategy is like I will worry like, "Oh my gosh, it's the beginning of the year." I'm like, "How will I pay taxes next year?" Or like, "What happens if my car breaks down and I have to buy a new car?" Like, I don't feel like I'm in a place where I could deal with that right now. I'm not. I'm not in a place where I could deal with that right now. I don't need to be in a place where I could deal with that right now. And if I'm worried about that, I am misusing my energy towards
Mhm.
something that isn't real, and
Mhm.
I'm wasting energy that I have now on something that I will have the resources for when it's time to deal with that. But
Mhm.
if I'm using the resources that I have now, I'm not being a good steward of the resources that I have. I should be looking at what I have as an opportunity to move forward in today. Like, what is the step I can take forward today? And like I told you on that drive, I'm like, right now we just need to go to sleep. Like that's all we need to do. And then tomorrow we can wake up and kind of see how do we feel? We can always, shorten the drive, extend it another day. We have several options, but we don't even need to like worry about picking an option right now, just knowing that we have some available and then we can move forward when it's time to address that. But I
Yeah.
loved
I
the other day when you brought up that verse, like, "Who by worrying can add another day to their
yeah,
lives?"
another hour to their life. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's true,
definitely.
and I would say that it probably steals many hours from our lives.
Yeah. I have one question. I'm gonna kind of jump topics here a little bit in transition, but can we talk about you specifically? Can you talk about some of the things that you took from North Carolina that you brought here, like your morning routine or, something like that, your walks or getting, walking to the Starbucks, establishing, you know, how did you, what did you bring from North Carolina that really keeps you grounded? That in the transition period, things will change in terms of how you do that, but what stayed the same that you brought with you?
Yeah, let's talk about the trip first, because I
Okay.
feel like for some reason that was the hardest part because there's so much unknown from day to day, and it's
Yeah.
just really exhausting driving that far. And we drove in separate cars, so that was tough as well. You're just very like isolated and kind of stuck in your head for a while. But I know from traveling in the past, like things that keep me grounded I have to be really intentional about, like, how much caffeine I'm drinking on the drive, not chewing, like, tons of gum, like, stuff like that. Like, let's just make sure my body's feeling good. Let's make sure we're getting out and walking every 2 hours. Let's make sure that we're hitting gyms on the way. We can take a little bit of extra time in the day to go work out. We'll both feel a lot better. We're gonna be sitting a lot, so mentally, we'll just feel better at getting some movement in. It helps us kind of ground and start our day off right. Let's make sure that we're stopping to eat frequently, uh, choosing foods that agree with our digestion. Like we ate one night, we were both like, "Oh, that was not great." So then we like chose things the rest of the trip where we both like digested it really well and it helped support our energy levels. And just making sure that during a time when stress was higher, that we didn't turn to, like, old coping mechanisms to try to manage stress, such as not eating enough, or for me, like, using, like, excessive amounts of caffeine. So just making sure that we can keep some staples of our routine, even though it wasn't, like, our whole routine,
Yeah.
and just using things like that to stay as, like, secure in self as possible while the external environment is shifting pretty rapidly.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you mentioned, and I'm just gonna, you know, expand on it, is really asking for what you need and making sure you're very intentional about doing those things that you need. For example, for me, it's like I'm not leaving until I can have my hour or so doing my devotionals in the morning and my time to journal. Like, no questions asked, that's my time. I'm not going to shift that around. It's how I get rooted in the beginning of the day. So if I need to adjust my gym time, I'm cool with that. But I know the things that I need to make sure I stay grounded along the way. And for example, when we're driving, maybe it's not an optimal place to stop to get food, but I'm feeling really hungry. I'm getting a little exhausted on this drive and having to trust that. you're gonna be cool with that even if we stopped, an hour before and it's not really that time. It's things like that where I felt like being able to ask for what you need in a transition with another person is extremely important, especially when you're sharing one space that's not as similar as our usual way of coexisting together. So I appreciate you bringing up the drive because I think you're right. I think there was a lot more than I thought that I brought with me on the driving part that I was almost more um, strict about making sure I had than I would even when we're here. I think, something else about the transition that was really cool for me was, like, during the drive, I usually struggle with binging when I drive really far. Like, I will restrict all day, and then at night, like, I'll eat something, and then it's kind of like I fell back into that pattern of I'm driving and I'm chewing gum, like you're saying, or I'm getting multiple different kinds of drinks that isn't water, like stuff like that. Or I've even had times where I've restricted multiple days in a row leading up to it because I'm stressed. And then on the actual drive, I'll struggle with eating too much. That leaves me uncomfortable and in a place of stress and anxiousness and guilt. But this trip out actually was able to realize like how much I appreciated the alone time and how good I was around food. Like it was another opportunity. Transition is another opportunity for you to see how much you've grown and how many things are so much different than before. Instead of being worried that something's going to happen on this drive that's similar, it's like, no, let me just see let me just see, let me just be open to this experience. And now I'm able to see just how much I've grown over, a 4-day drive, being able to prioritize rest and recovery and refeed that kept me going throughout the whole trip without struggling with food at all.
That's a big win. And I think you're right. It does really reveal how much growth we've had because those were not easy days. And I think by the last day, we were Mm, a little bit more stressed and tired, and we kind of recognized it in our interactions even, and we just had to, like, be really open with communication, and you even pointed out when we stopped, like, "Hey, let's just reset, like, we're both really tired, we've had a long trip, we're kinda, like, running on E, let's just, like, give ourselves some grace here." Like, protect low energy if we need it and move forward understanding that we're both just kind of in that place. And we'll talk about those kind of things more on our, like, relationship series, but I think if you're with someone during a transitional phase, just keeping really open communication about what you need and where you're at, understanding that you're gonna be pouring a lot of energy into managing your stress and staying as, like, keeping your energy within a good sustainable range, and that may take a little bit of attention away from some of those other areas that you would usually be investing in. So you might not be, like, working as much during your transitional phase, or you might not be going above and beyond for other people, or you might not be super proactive about, like, planning date nights or things like that, just depending on what your transition looks like. So making sure that you're communicating with those people who are important in your life, like, "Hey, this is what's going on right now." Like, for me, I reached out to all my clients ahead of time. I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna be on the road. It's gonna take me a little bit of time to get back to you just this week. I just want you guys to be aware so everyone understands and has clear expectations, and you're not overcommitting yourself during a time when you should probably anticipate that a lot more energy is gonna be going towards just keeping yourself grounded.
What was one of the ways that you realized you've grown on this trip?
I like structure a lot, and in the past, the idea of being on the road for that long and not getting to, like, eat my meals that I made at home the whole time or staying at places that I wasn't really aware of like the resources that they had, or, even staying with like your aunt, someone I hadn't met before, and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be so tired by that point in the trip, and I'm going to want to feel really like engaged, but I do have some like social anxiety. So all of that in the past would have been really overwhelming to me. And I really felt like I was able to just take it one day at a time and just be like, this is what I need right now. Like, I'm just going to be quiet for a while. I'm going to take advantage of this time and see it as an opportunity to maybe read a book that I want to read, or maybe drive in silence for a while and kind of take that opportunity if I need it, or maybe call someone that I want to talk to. So started looking for the opportunity and the challenge instead of sitting there like counting down the hours or stressing about the next leg of the journey, which is where I would typically stay. I'd be so worried about, oh my gosh, tomorrow we have the longest drive ever. And then, oh my gosh, tomorrow we're going to have to move all this stuff into the apartment, and just on, moving into the future where I'm never really enjoying what's happening right now. And I felt like I was able to stay really present and like embrace what was happening right now. And I had some like awesome conversations with friends and family members on the phone. And I read a book I really loved, and I listened to some really great podcasts, and I like took in the views of everything we were driving through, and it just was like an adventure. And that's something that when I did my like dream life visualization, I realized how much I want to experience adventure in my life, but it's not a state that I let myself live in because I'm too worried about the next thing, that I'm never present in the adventure that's happening right now.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, I'm excited to see how many more adventures we do here.
And now we've like really moved into this transition phase where we're
Definitely,
like
definitely.
full into a new experience. And I saw this chart, I guess it's called the Bridges transition model, and it just kind of defines like a way a transition works. Because last week I talked about like the wheel and moving through like the seasons of transition. But this talks about like moving through, you're ending something and moving into denial. So that's kind of like the anxiety of it. Like, am I supposed to leave this thing and move into the new? Then you move into resistance where you start kind of fighting the change. Then you move into exploration where you start venturing into the idea of what the new chapter can bring. And that's where you start to move into like, oh, this is going to be exciting. There's so many possibilities. Like, you start to experience your creativity again. You start to like recollect that energy that was kind of tied up in the worry of it towards
Mhm.
creating the new. And then you get to move into the phase of commitment where you move forward with like excitement and clarity, and you're really aligned and motivated. So I feel like we kind of moved through, at least for me, like I moved through that lower phase, and I'm like coming back up into that like, oh, this is exciting. There's so much here. I wonder what we're gonna do. What is our life gonna look like? It's cool to see the apartment coming together and like feeling that energy come back in towards the end of this transition.
Can you share your screen so we can see it?
Yeah, definitely. So the phases are here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is great. And I'll share this link if you're watching it on YouTube as well, because it talks about how to move through each phase and like what you need to focus on, and maybe like questions to ask yourself. So this is kind of what we were talking about earlier during that initial
Hmm.
phase of denial, asking yourself like, what do I know for sure? What resources do I have? How have I navigated challenges in the past? How does this provide evidence of what I'm capable of now? And then what do I need to let go of, and what does that make space for? So some of these kind of journaling points that I think would be really helpful if you're moving through a transition phase, and just creating a little bit of clarity around, I think, the acceptability of having some negative emotions, but then being able to like move through them productively instead of getting
Yeah.
stuck in this phase of worrying.
Can you go back up again? Yeah. This is interesting to me because I think that this doesn't happen like before the actual transition happens, you're in denial and then you're in resistance, exploration, commitment. It's like I almost feel like my denial and resistance phases are coming up more now than prior. I think this transition phase or this journey that we're on might not look like denial and resistance happen before you actually make the move. It might actually happen after the transition because there is that excitement, that newness, that, oh my gosh, like something's being reborn in my life. And it isn't until you're actually here. I guess for me, this is maybe it's different than you. For me, now that I'm here and having to get myself very grounded in this new place, the excitement of getting here is gone because we're here. And so now I'm having to really work through, okay, what's coming up for me right now? Where am I experiencing a little bit of denial and resistance about this decision? And how can I transition that into exploration and commitment? So I just think being honest about that with me personally, like your denial and resistance phases might pop up even after you've made the transition and you're working your way into getting grounded in the newness that is the other side of the transition you just made.
Yeah, and I might counter with, I kind of think this is up and down and up and down and up and down forever. Like, we're
Hmm.
always transitioning if we're growing. So, I'm curious if maybe there was a time of resistance, and then moving into the move, you got to move towards that, like, exploration and commitment, and now you're moving into a new kind of like the next growth phase, so back into denial and resistance. Like, you're kind of, like, constantly taking on more and more responsibility.
Hmm.
And I think it's just important to note, like, this isn't I don't think this is the same for everybody, but I also do think this isn't like a you move into exploration and commitment and you're just, like, thriving in your new life. Like, even if in one area of life you feel like that, there may be another area where you're moving into denial and resistance. Like, all right, you got a new job and it's going really well and you're loving it and you're feeling really empowered and your boss really believes in you and you have great coworkers, but like you're struggling in your relationship a little bit and there's tension there and you know that something's got to give in that area. So I think understanding like this isn't even just a broad overview of life. I think we can kind of go through these waves in different areas at different times. So it's possible to be feeling resistance in one area and maybe like excitement and exploration in another area.
Yeah, I can definitely totally hear where you're coming from with that. I find I struggle with the word commitment because if you're committed in my mind, you're committed 100% to, and maybe it says something down lower that's different, but the whole life is like this. Like you're always going to take two steps forward, one step back, two step forward, one step back. Like that is the process of life, but it's into like for these this clarify your purpose, share your vision, create a clear plan of action, make commitments, take consistent action. To me, if you're in a commitment phase, you are intentionally purposeful in your mindset. You don't drop into the other two, resistance and um what was the first one? Denial. You're not denying anything anymore and you're not resisting anything anymore necessarily. For me, when you get to a place of commitment, when I think about like Davidson to North Carolina or Davidson to Phoenix, that's a transition. The more denial and resistance and exploration and commitment then comes in like my own exploration of self at that point. Like the transition in itself, once I'm committed to it, then it's like, all right, I'm back in that mindset like you talked about earlier. I'm finding opportunity in all of this. I'm finding my purpose in all of this. I know in my intuition this was the right decision, so I'm committed 100% to opening up myself completely to this experience fully, where I feel like once you're there, it's like you'll have to battle a little bit when you're tired and exhausted and be a scientist and take in information and get fascinated about it, but you're still committed, and I think when you can get to that commitment, that is just so monumental to me in this process of being actually truly consistently committed and doing the things that you know, creating that clear plan of action to not let your mind even go back to that denial or that resistance phase. Just another idea, another thought
Yeah,
for our
definitely.
listeners.
Yeah, I think that's great. Do you feel like when you were on the road, you mentioned like your morning routine being something that you protect. How do you recommend, or do you have like a strategy or maybe just like a simple takeaway that someone could practice when they're in a transitional period to stay grounded and stay really connected to their intuition?
For me, I would say you have to find your anchor action. You have to find that one thing that gets you back in your body. If we stay in our minds, we're never actually going to hear or feel whole or get connected enough to know the next right step. That getting in your body for me is the way I am able to always choose faith and trust and active surrender in the process. The second I have no neck and get disconnected, I get in worry and fear and anxiousness. So that's why my morning routine was so important because I needed to have that mindset of opportunity and the mindset of growth and the mindset of trust and faith that there is a plan and I just need to be dialed into the next right step. I don't need to be worrying or anxious or fearful about the future because I'm here in the right now.
That's great. I think taking a few minutes to just ground and check in and ask yourself, like, what am I feeling? Like, what are my emotions right now? And not with judgment, but just like really seeing where you're at. I like to journal, so that's kind of how I like to process that. But then, like you said, something that gets you into your body, especially on something that's requiring a lot of traveling, like if you're driving a lot or if you're flying really far, or if you're doing something like say you're going to like a work conference and it's like a 4-day conference, something that's having you like sit in a room for 8 hours a day. A lot of times in those situations, we become really disconnected from our bodies. So finding ways throughout the day to reconnect with mind and body, I think is super important to help see where you're at and make sure that you're distributing your energy appropriately so that you can move through that day with your energy intact and honestly trying to operate as your highest self because you're going to feel possibly very tired. That can usually lead to like higher emotions and that can bleed into a lot of other areas of our lives. So we are always responsible for kind of checking in with ourselves and making sure that we're grounded and that we're like managing our energy appropriately so that we can show up in the best way in other areas of our life even during a transitional period.
Yeah, that's a great point to end on, I think. Leave them with
Awesome.
that.
Leave them with that. So this
Yeah.
week, your challenge is to identify and practice an anchor behavior that grounds you. We've talked about lots of different ones in the past. Dee's talked about meditating. You can use an app like Insight Timer. There's also ones more specific to like breathing. You mentioned one the other day,
Headspace
Headspace. Okay. So
or calm.
those or trying like a journaling practice. So something this week, just commit to it for say 5 to 10 minutes a day and don't make it more of a commitment than that. Just give yourself that as the minimum time. If you meet that, that's awesome. That's perfect. And just make it more of a practice about actually doing it than trying to make it like an extended amount of time and just start to notice how is this affecting your day differently? Do you feel like you can show up in different areas of your life a little bit more effectively? Do you feel like you're maybe enjoying your life and seeing it as an adventure a little bit more? Are you looking for the challenge in what you're facing, or are you looking for the opportunity within it? start to really focus on that this week, and would love to hear your experiences. If you guys want to comment below or reach out and let us know, we can share that next week as well.
A couple of things I will say for those of you who are busy minded and find stillness to be super intense right away. Some of the things you can do to get yourself regulated quickly is put cold water on your face, ice packs on your face will change your state. You can get upside down doing like you can sit on the wall with your legs up on the wall, or you can actually get upside down, like doing a headstand that'll regulate you, or stretching. If you get grounded by stretching where you're in a quiet place, but you're still actively focusing on which muscle you're stretching and how it feels, and sitting in that, like a yin style yoga session could really be helpful for you as well.
That's great. I would highly recommend starting there for those of you who are like me and your brains are moving at a very quick pace, and the idea of laying on the floor in silence feels a little bit stressful. Start small, but do something, just one thing for you, and see how it affects your week. Thank you guys for watching, listening. This is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as YouTube. If you want to check out the YouTube video, if you're listening to this, that can be super helpful to be able to see some of the graphics that we talk about throughout. In the description below is a discount for Buzzsprout. If you want to start your own podcast, you can use that code to both get a discount and to support the channel. Otherwise, if you guys want to reach out to us at all, we are totally available, and our emails are in the caption below. Thank you guys for supporting, and stay tuned for next week, another episode on Time Under Tension.